The Singapore Armed Forces is the military component of the Ministry of Defence of the Republic of Singapore as part of the city-state's total defence strategy. The SAF has three services: the Singapore Army, the Republic of Singapore Air Force and the Republic of Singapore Navy. The SAF protects the interests, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Singapore from external threats. The SAF relies heavily on a large pool of conscripts in the active and reserve forces. It has an approximate active strength of around 72,000 personnel and is capable of mobilizing over 1 million reservists in case of national exigencies or full-scale war. Reservists make up more than 80% of its military defense system and form the backbone of the SAF. Singapore's military role stems from its strategic geographical location, an asset exploited by both local settlers and foreign colonists alike. Archaeological excavations have discovered remnants of fortresses and other forms of military fortifications in pre-colonial Singapore. Sir Stamford Raffles, founder of modern Singapore, chose Singapore in 1819 to establish a new British colony with the security concerns of the British in the Far East in mind against the Dutch. Thus, Singapore, which attained Crown Colony status, played an active role in British military interests for decades, particularly in the years leading up to the First and Second World Wars. The Singapore Volunteer Rifle Corps. It assisted in suppressing the 1915 Singapore Mutiny. In 1921, the SVC was combined with other volunteer forces from Malacca and Penang as the Straits Settlements Volunteer Force. During World War II, the SSVF took part in the Battle of Singapore, but most of its members were captured on the 15th of February 1942 when their positions were overrun by Japanese forces. After the end of the war, the SSVF was reconstituted in 1948. But the SVF was absorbed into the Singapore military forces following the disbandment of the SSVF in 1954. Subsequently, in 1961, SMF was renamed to Singapore Armed Forces. When Singapore achieved independence in 1965, its military consisted of only 2 infantry regiments, commanded by British officers and made up of mostly non-Singaporean residents. Britain pulled its military out of Singapore in October 1971, leaving behind only a small amount of British, Australian and New Zealand forces as a token military presence. The last of the British soldiers left Singapore in March 1976. The New Zealand troops were the last to leave Singapore. In 1989, Singapore believed that it needed a larger, capable yet economic efficient defence force to protect and defend itself as it is surrounded by several larger neighbouring countries in the Southeast Asia region. At that time, Singapore enlisted the covert assistance of Israel, which sent its military advisors who helped Singapore set up a defense force modeled in part after the Israel Defense Forces. Jungle warfare techniques were taught so that the Singaporean army could engage in combat conflict in the jungle areas of its neighboring countries. If need be, the army also procured battle tanks from Israel, doing so before neighboring Malaysia acquired theirs, thereby gaining an advantage. Armed Forces Day is commemorated by the SAF annually on the 1st of July, with a parade held at the Singapore Armed Forces Military Institute or SAFTI. On the 1st of July 2018, Defence Minister Ng Eng Hen announced that the SAF would transition from its current third-generation technologies to fourth technologies by overhauling its current arsenal. On the 27th of February 2019, the Office of Inspector General of the Armed Forces was set up to ensure that safety protocols are applied and enforced throughout the military following the death of Aloysius Pang, who was the fourth training-related fatality in 18 months following 2017. Singapore is described as a military powerhouse with the best air force and navy in Southeast Asia. Singapore's vast wealth allows it to purchase and make the best equipment available and incorporate high-end technological equipment into its military forces. The SAF is also called the most technologically advanced armed forces across Association of Southeast Asian nation-states. A key recent example is Singapore's decision to acquire 4 Lockheed Martin's F-35B Joint Strike fighters, which the United States approved. with the option to acquire a further 8 more. This acquisition is significant as Singapore will fly the most advanced fleet of fighters in its region, which reflects its security relationship with the United States. In addition, the F-35Bs have a significant impact to Singapore's air power since the small-sized country no longer needs to depend on long, vulnerable runways to operate the aircraft due to the fifth-generation's fighter jets' short takeoff and vertical landing capability. The jet's advanced network-enabled capabilities would be additionally advantageous for Singapore, which is seeking to modernize its military.